piss that I'm keen
Oh.
Today's session, we're going to respond to where we've developed since those 50% questions. We have a design fly-through that we're keen to share. And then we'll talk through the look and feel in each stage of the project. So from the ZIP, Emerson Street, Market Street, and concluding with Marine Parade Piazza. And then we'll conclude and talk about what the next steps are over the next couple of weeks, next 4 weeks, to get to where we need to be for 100%. I guess just on this as well, as Georgina was saying, 75%, we've got a lot of the structural pieces in place. A lot of the designs will look relatively resolved and finished, but it's really a stage that we're looking for as much feedback as possible around where things are positioned, the look and feel, and so we can fine tune over the next 4 weeks to get a really good concept design. In terms of the 4 questions we talked through at the 50%, one was around the identity of Ahuriri and how that's represented in Emerson Street. This we'll be talking through the look and feel, and we've put some pieces together, and it's still work in progress, but we've I think what it's starting to communicate in all the drawings is something that does feel distinct to place, and we'll be keen to take any feedback on that as well. In terms of the stormwater, for the concept design, we're definitely going for best practice, and that's integrating the rain gardens where possible, getting that alternation of rain gardens and tree pits. So it's definitely the best environmental approach for the street. James and his team are kind of working through other conversations with around the three waters, and
so kind of to follow on from Georgina, that we're working closely with the Three Waters team to identify any opportunities for upgrades to not only the wastewater system but the stormwater system within Emerson Street. They've already identified to us certain sections of the existing networks that are not functioning as they should. And then during the next stages, we'll go to the wider utilities providers, power and comms, just to make sure that we're integrating any future upgrades that they may have planned on Emerson Street into the construction phase. So we'll deal to everything in one hit.
Just, sorry, that's a really good segue. Just sort of looking at, I mean, appreciate the way that Emerson Street is at the moment, all the cobblestones. Now, has any thought been put into maybe, I mean, I don't want to create any extra work, but looking at how much it would cost to have actually those put back in from a labour perspective? Because, I mean, obviously, we've got a few people in the community that don't necessarily want this project to go ahead. But sort of, if we actually get that quote and say, well, actually, it's going to cost us this much to do, I would imagine that would be a significant amount of labour to do that. Again, not trying to create any extra work, but just more ability to say, hey, we're doing it this, we're being proactive with doing these pipes before they blow, 91-year-old pipes and so forth. Yeah, just thought if any thought would be put into that.
At the end of the presentation, we've got a few options around how we can manage that level of investment. And so once, I think the important piece is to get the parts of the design that are kind of the commonality and what are really important to get right. And then the bits and pieces that in terms of investment can be managed. And
thank you.
So starting with a strong design enables us to do that as well.
Cool.
I've just got a question about the stormwater. Where does it go?
It's a very complex system. So Emerson, the majority of it runs down Emerson towards Clive Square, and then hangs a left and then comes back round and ends up discharging out at the beach
out here.
On that very strange little structure that kind of goes out.
With the pier.
My understanding is that there's been some big issues with that in the past, but again, my understanding is that there's a scheme or project that's looking at that particular part of the network where sort of as scope is limited to Emerson Street itself.
Is that where it goes now, or is that where it's going to go?
That's where it goes now.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing we're on the theme of stormwater, when we have heavy rainfalls, Emerson Street has tended to fill up quite fast and go back into shops. And because there's quite a downhill slope from the top of Emerson Street to the bottom, has any thought been put into preventing water running towards inside of buildings, for a better term, I guess?
Yes, so we're cognizant of that issue. The grading of the street will be such that away from the shops. And we're also, with the integration of the rain gardens, we're introducing a lot more outlet capacity in the street itself. So there'll be a lot, there's actually very limited pits if you walk down Emerson Street, and they're all flush and they're all quite small. So the inlet capacity for that storm water is quite small and it bypasses. So we'll be putting a lot more capacity. What we can't fix as part of this project is the downstream capacity of the stormwater system from the square to the outfall that we just talked to. That's a much wider issue that the Emerson Street project won't be able to solve.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. Oh, right. Sorry, being recorded. You did mention smart stormwater solutions in terms of, I assume, some permeable surfaces. What percentage do we know of permeable surface are we adding to the environment? Because that's got an effect, obviously, on capacity.
Those numbers there.
Is it
Not off the top of my
just
head.
an indication? Is it a small amount? Is it
Yeah, we'll be able to show where the rain gardens sit within the street, and that has been calculated based on the catchment per section of street.
Yeah, because you can have permeable walkways, and I suppose it all comes at a
And
cost.
it's also passive irrigation for the planting as well, so it's a win-win approach.
Thank you.
The other piece that we got a lot of feedback on last time was lighting, and in terms of the ability to add character to the street, and I think we've got a really good progress update on that as well. And in terms of managed access, we got a really good steer that the ability to use bollards and to be able to transform it from a loading street to a pedestrian street is a great piece for the project as well, so we've adopted that. What I'm keen to start with is just a bit of a design fly through and just show you where the design is at. Then we'll talk through some detail and explain the components that have developed the design to where it's at, and then we'll loop back to the fly through at the end as well.
Hello, yes.
Like
Yeah.
flyovers.
Especially when I go crashing through
Full screen.
there.
So this is starting obviously from the squares, Clover Memorial, and our first piece of the project is the zip. What we're really trying to do here is to create a cohesive street environment that connects those two green spaces and is really flexible in the way that it can be populated for events, or whether it can be something we're considering as potentially space for parking during the weekdays. And so having that flexible zone on the Memorial Square side and a planted and furniture zone on the southern side. Now moving into Emerson Street West, what we're doing at this stage is we've got on the northern side, we're retaining all those palms as they are and introducing space for permanent furniture as well as dining furniture. And then we've got this activity zone on the southern side, which introduces the shade trees. It's a bit more detailed with the paving. We've got some furniture that's, we're really interested in the geometry of a circle and the ability to have a nod to Art Deco, but also referencing what's the existing lighting. And then so the proposed lighting, we've looked at quite a few options, but we're really looped back to reusing the existing type of orb structure with a modern fitting, but a little bit more playful, and all these elements starting to piece together what the look and feel of the street is. I think the planting, what we're trying to show is something that's really vibrant, and it has got a bit of structure in terms of relationship to the architecture. And that's also something we're testing out, is how many trees in a space still enable views to the facade and doesn't get too cluttered. So that type of thing we'll be refining over the next 4 weeks as well. As we move up to the piazza, certainly taking the existing steps out of the space, making it flush. Again, keeping that structure of the street really similar the whole way through, so it's really clear, and in terms of accessibility, it's a lot easier to use. And then on the piazza itself, there's so much opportunity there to create a really great space. Being able to rethink what the lawn is around the Putakawa trees, continuing that narrative of the circular geometry, and creating subspaces that, whether it's in an event mode when it's full of people and they can use all the space across the Marine Parade, or whether it's a quieter time and then you've got little subspaces within that. And certainly thinking about the existing frontages to both the Dome and the Masonic building and making sure they can be activated as they currently are. And obviously lighting is a really great way to pull that all together.
Max, you got a question?
Yes, is there anything to stop ram raids?
So that was when we talked last time around the managed access. We were talking about bringing up bollards from 11 o'clock in the morning right through until 6 a.m. the next day. So that loading time would be in the morning, which we understand is less of a critical time for ram raids, but certainly later into the evening, you wouldn't be able to drive through the street. What we're going to go into now is a little bit on how we've developed the look and feel over the last 6 weeks.
Can I just ask a question, please? Just going back, just looking at the fly through.
Yeah.
At the moment, there's a proportion of parking through that area. What percentage of space is going to be available for parking, or is there any design
So that
for
would be
disabled
also
parking?
that would also go to the managed access. So during the morning, 6 a.m. to 11 a.m., vehicles would be able to go through, and we've got space within there that could be used as parking or it could be used as pedestrian space. But then what we're currently thinking about is those bollards come up at 11 a.m. and then it's pedestrianised. And certainly around mobility parking, we would need to understand where they are so people can access that street, even if they aren't able to drive through it. But thinking about places like Clive Square East, Dalton Street, Hastings Street, so it's really good access for everyone.
Sally?
Thank you. And just, it's lovely to see because
Do you
we've
just want to,
faced-
sorry, grab a microphone? I know, we seem to have a percentage of
Unusual, thank you. It's lovely to see it all like that because, and obviously in our minds, what's been presented to us in the past is the phased approach and those different stages. From a financial prudence perspective, is the idea with the overall plan, taking into consideration all those phases, is it put everything in as much as possible and then in the future as phases, as the time goes on and we start a new stage or phase, we're able to keep things in or take things out? Is that the best way to handle the budget?
So we've undertaken to design the entire stretch all at once so that Emerson Street has the same look and feel and the character is across the entire length of Emerson. As far as the stages go, we would be looking at, as part of our developed design, understanding the level of investment that is palatable to council. So each of those stages, and we'll go through that at the end, if you like, or we can talk about it earlier, but we've got images that show you basically different tiers of investment, and that's how we would be value engineering the design. So it may be that you choose to have a higher end quality design at the zip, so there might be all paving in there, and yet in the Emerson Street component you may wish to have a combination of paving and asphalt or paving and concrete, or the quality of pavers may be that they're concrete pavers, but they're still unit pavers rather than natural stone. So there's a whole lot of value engineering that we can undertake regardless of the actual design layout. So the design layout doesn't change, and we've provided flexibility within that for those different tiers of investment. Thank you.
Rhonda?
Just, we have a few CAFs in town that push out into those spaces. Is that taken into account?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So like the Cappadocia and, yeah.
Yeah, we've got in that, I'll show you some of the images and I'll talk to those as we come across them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see the road straight, whereas we have a meandering road at the moment. Is that because the sun hits on that side of the road? So we...
That's certainly part of the consideration, but also just looking at other examples, not only in New Zealand, but around the world, the evidence is that having a straight carriageway, but having furniture and planting on the edges of it, lighting, that creates really good edge friction and it takes away some of the confusion that's in a chicane street. And there's a lot of clutter and underutilised space currently, so we're trying to maximise the street as much as we can.
Thank you. Richard?
I think we're right at the start. I'm just looking at the zip area and the Memorial Square and Civic Square there. With the picture that we have in front of us, all the gardens are ripped out and it all looks like grass, and the what we call it, the pond's gone with the eels and everything. Is that the case, or is this just
No, that's just a representation that our focus of the design is in the zip itself.
Cool?
That's why we haven't modelled up all the other pieces, but it's just to communicate what's happening in the zip.
It's very expensive to do. Yeah.
Cool. In terms of look and feel, I think we shared this last time, but we've done an exercise to capture what the essence, the DNA of Ahuriri is. And it's starting to speak to all the diversity in terms of the community, in terms of the architectural fabric, aspirations for mana whenua, and then what are the references that we can draw on for a design, so the materiality, the planting, the elements speak to this place. So the first piece here, we've undertaken some mapping, so understanding what the cultural context is of place. We've had several sessions with Te Waka Rangipu, and it's still early days, but what we're thinking about at this stage is where cultural narrative could sit within the space. And although the narratives aren't fully fleshed out, we're just cognizant of that. And again, that's into the space where we've got all the furniture, the lighting, the paving all coming together, and that could add a real richness to that zone. And likewise with the geology, the ecology, taking references in terms of the materials we choose. If, as George was saying, we end up with different materials in terms of the level of investment, like there are abilities to spec a concrete, so it's still got something that's really rich, and whether it's the river stones of the area or from the pebble beaches, just making sure all of those things really sing together. And then obviously the social context of events and when it ebbs and flows from big events to smaller things, and the evening activation through the lighting strategy. This is...
Can I just ask a process question on that?
Yeah.
In the Tiaka project, we had, is it Israel?
Yeah.
Did a piece of work around how we could, I'm paraphrasing here, but include art and storytelling through the design. Have we got that role within this project?
So the Tiaka project is a co-design project with mana whenua as the key partners. This is a community-led design, so we've got a range of stakeholders that we're working with, mana whenua being one of them, as well as our retailers, businesses, community. So yes, we have been integrating those stories, and we've been working with Te Waka Rangipu also, and we've actually been dovetailing into the cultural narrative that has been established for Tiaka in this project, so that we are actually complementing each other with regard to the outcomes for both designs. So yes, there is a cultural narrative, and Hilary's also working on that. But as far as it hasn't been, we haven't engaged someone specifically like Israel as a mana whenua design lead.
Right.
That will come at a later stage of the project.
Okay. Just to follow up, my understanding was that he was coming at it with an artist's lens, and regardless of what the story was, he was having input at a really early stage to enable the canvas of the project to be suitable for art and story. So has that bit of work happened?
Yes. Yeah. So that work has been undertaken at the moment, and there's also a mana whenua advisory person with Land Lab who's been working with us and Te Waka Rangipu.
Okay.
So that all of those, that kōrero and kaupapa is working behind the scenes as part of the design process.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's space across projects across New Zealand. We've been working with artists, and often it's developing the narrative first and then working with a specific artist to delve out the detail of what the artworks are. But certainly at these earlier stages, we're really cognizant of that and making sure there's good, valuable space within the design and that can be carried through.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Rhonda.
Are we also working with the Art Deco Trust then?
Yes, we are. We've actually got a member of the Art Deco Trust on our steering group, and we've also been working with Napier City Business and their membership as well. So before today's workshop, we had a drop-in session, which is what we also did prior to the 50% workshop. So that's how we're engaging currently, and we're also with our steering group. We have a meeting this evening. So yes, the Art Deco Trust are on that group.
This diagram here is describing how all those layers emerge within the concept design. So taking those references from, as we were saying, like a cultural narrative through to geology, ecology, those references coming through in the concept design, and particularly the central piece that indicates those two activity zones, which are either side of the vehicle carriageway. They have that ability to be really rich in terms of all these different pieces coming together. I thought it would be useful to just show some of the precedents around different projects that we thought were potentially interesting or relevant for this one. Certainly looking at geometry and whether it's a reference to a nod to Art Deco, but something that's also very fluid and enabling the movement through the street, but also the planting enabling that. And we're really interested in the idea of complementing the existing palms with not only canopy trees, but also Nico palms would be beautiful alongside the existing facades.
So can I just ask a question, seeing you mentioned trees?
Yep.
I guess Emerson Street has a lot of people stopping, taking photos of our Art Deco buildings down that street. So I think you'd have to get the trees right.
Yes.
So the photos can still be taken and the buildings can still do their thing.
Yeah.
And so just as long as there's some thinking along those lines.
Definitely. We've definitely included that thinking to 75%, but I think we'll continue to fine tune that through to the final stage.
Yeah, just further to what Richard just said, the Nico palms are very dense trees, like you can't see through them, so it might actually block a few views, yeah.
I think on other projects we've been able to secure mature Nico palms as well, so they're the right height for the buildings, and I think that would be part of that decision making.
And also part of our placement around the tree species will be, we have for the most part a continuous stretch of Art Deco facades, but there are a few anomalies down the street. And so we would be looking to make the most of those missing teeth, if you like, by maybe introducing some shade and some trees in there.
Love it, yeah, filter.
Some other precedents we've been looking at, along with those discussions with Te Waka Rangipu, have been the two images on the left of projects that we've done both in Watakaro, Christchurch and Auckland on the top, but being able to combine a geometric paving pattern with a layer of cultural narrative. And the one in Watakaro is alongside the Avon River, and it's really beautiful because it has a sequence that draws you along the river, and each one's different and tells a different story. And then the other ones are motif patterns that we've used in different ways on other projects, but Potama, Ruponga and Pātiki patterns, and the kind of synergy between that and something that's a nod to Art Deco can be really beautiful.
Art Deco, that's called cigarette.
And also lighting. Lighting, we have got some images and I'm sure you've seen some of them already, but the ability to create really unique subspaces along the whole project. And so this diagram talks to that, being able to, the zip has a lot of different potential to the other parts of Emerson Street. So what we're proposing is catenary lighting, and it also adds to the festive nature of the zip. And likewise on Market Street, it's a smaller space, but it's a subspace, and catenary lighting can draw through what the current activation is through the whole street. And then obviously the Marine Parade Piazza, that's the focal point, and having something that's really unique and exciting for the city to express in terms of lighting, that's what we're showing as well. We have been working with the Becker lighting team as well, and so all the lighting that we're pitching is to New Zealand standards, but also really conscious of CIPTED, crime prevention and improving safe spaces. And then also some initial thinking around dark sky, and whether it's dark sky or just conscious of residents in the area that it's emitting light in the correct way. So this is kind of what we're building towards. We're taking what the current is on the left, and we're starting to develop a language of furniture that, as we were saying, whether the level of investment changes, this can be consistent throughout the street. And just a little top-down view of what that activity zone is. So the paving where the vehicles are and the footpath spaces can be quite simple, but then you get this real layers of richness through the middle. And with the a building facade, just a typical one, but just to show, and just to show the different scale between what the existing light is on the far left and just a slight height variation in that, which enables us to just pull them apart a little bit further. So then moving through the design pieces, the different stages, we'll start with the zip. And so we did share this last time, but just thinking about what the vision here is, and it's a kind of complementary gateway to the city. We're trying to make it really cohesive with the two squares. It needs to be really flexible. And as we said, there's a lot of opportunity here that's different to Emerson Street. So as it is currently, the zip is kind of the void between the two spaces. And what we're proposing is to create a flush surface and extend that language from Emerson Street all the way through. So as it is currently, it's quite narrow footpaths and over 13 metres of roadway. And what we're proposing is to just increase the provision for pedestrians through the whole space, and having a flexible zone on the side of Memorial Square, having a clear carriageway, which is the same, proposed to be the same direction all the way from Hastings Street down Emerson Street. And then again, having a good flexible furniture zone and planting.
So just to clarify, so that would still be accessible by cars,
Yes.
but it would be coming from the coast
Towards the image.
towards.
Yeah. From Emerson.
Emerson.
From Clive east to west. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I have a question? In the total proposal, what's the total number of car parks that we're losing?
So I don't know if we've got the numbers to hand, but we have done an exercise in terms of what those numbers are and what can be gained on Clive Square East, on Dalton Street.
I think the net was about, we ended up with the same overall.
So I
What
think
we
we're
lost,
pretty
we
comfortable in
replaced.
proposing changing this management approach, because there's a lot of space that we can work with around. I think the main point would be making sure that there's really good accessibility parking close to Emerson Street, because that would support the street as well.
We just put temporary,
These are just a couple.
Rhonda, sorry.
Just in the SIP area, obviously we have, events in here and also the market.
Yeah.
So are we planning to put in some, like things so we don't have power cords going everywhere and all that sort of stuff? Because that's
power,
quite a big
yeah.
issue
Yeah.
when we're there. And also, and there is room for the food trucks and all that to get in there?
We've got a couple images here, so this would be more of a typical day.
Yeah.
This would be when we can provide parking, whether it is flexible parking, and then in the evening for an event space. So we've got a lot of good space on the northern side of the zip there, and that can cater to whether it's pop-up stalls or larger trucks. And I think the lighting, catenary lighting, has a really soft ambient quality to it, and I think particularly here in Market Street, they'll kind of add a really nice different character to the space.
So in terms of this ZIP area, obviously we've got the Better Off funding, which is funding the whole design. Is that also funding this first phase of the actual ZIP work?
So yes, the Better Off Fund is funding the design work and has funded the pre-engagement work, and a portion of it is funding this. There's also in our 3-year plan, there's another 300 in the for the first stage. So
is that in year one?
That's in year one. So so what we've used for design, we've kind of brought the design forward from what was in the 3-year plan, and we're just swapping it over. So yes.
Thank you.
What we've also got in this image is an idea that we're interested in, is reusing some of the existing light fittings as a sculptural piece. And there's an artist that's done this really awesome installation in the States, but being able to play with those existing globe fittings in a cluster and with palms, I think that's something, whether it's that or whether it's something else, but having lighting features like that would be really good for the street. Yep.
There. Is there enough room to keep the amount of stalls we've got there now or for growth?
I think, yeah, certainly through what we've got here currently. So yeah, we've got heaps of space there, and it will be balancing, like the comment was around the trees and getting that like longitudinally in the street correct. It'll be the only piece we've got along there is the lighting poles. So we'll just be pushing and pulling them to make sure we get good space.
Richard and then Max.
Yeah,
Effectively, Corey, it would be wider, wouldn't it? Because we're having a flush curve.
Yes,
So you
yeah.
would
It'll be
actually
more
be gaining
usable
more
because
space
you've
because
also
of
got the
the fact that
footpath
we now use
spaces.
the road.
Yeah.
And then that will flow on same grade into each of the squares as well.
just another thing, I guess, to take into account. Art Deco Trust are looking
Yeah.
to move into the building down there.
Yeah.
So what effect, maybe we could get bombarded with buses, although there's a bus terminal across the road. How are we joining the two together? I know we're probably just going a little bit out of scope, but you know, if we're going to be landing buses down there off cruise ships for Art Deco, what sort of thinking's being put into?
So our design team have been working with our transportation team on that, and as much as the construction scope is within the ZIP, the actual overall consideration for making Emerson Street work and the wider area is considering Clive Square East, Clive Square West, Dalton Street. And so as far as the buses and where the bus terminal is, all of those things have been taken into account, particularly around the rationalising of the one-way system, which increases the car parking, particularly at this end of town, but also the potential to accommodate buses and also potentially RV parking. So we're expecting that this would be a node, and we're designing it accordingly, that we would be looking at multimodal opportunities here for parking and delivery of pedestrians and people.
Yes, in the consultation document that we approved, it said the total cost was 10.5 million. Is that the figure that you've got over 3 years?
Yes, that's the figure in the 3-year plan, yes.
Oh, Juliet.
Yeah, just a question about the bike parking. Do we know where that's going to go and what kind of bike parking?
So there's still a detail that we haven't quite landed on, but we've got, I think, particularly that northern zone through Emerson Street at least, or the Clive Square, where we've got a lot more space, certainly, kind of getting that peppering of bike parking, bins, space for business bins as well, so it can be concentrated in one space. Drinking fountains, all those things will be pieces that we fold into the design. Moving into the next section, we've got Emerson Street. So again, there is a slightly different event function for Emerson Street. It's not quite the same as what the ZIP or Marine Piazza are, but there will be events that can be catered for within it, particularly around the concentration at Market Street. I think around the Green Street concept, we really want to increase the amount of shade and amenity through the street. And then I think accessible and legible, that's really important on Emerson Street. And as we were saying, clarity in terms of where vehicles move through the space, removing the trip hazards, and having good active edges either side of that, so that helps slow vehicle speeds as well. So this is Emerson Street West as it is currently, and not only chicaning, but chicaning in quite a there's a lot happening at the moment, and I think it does result in a lot of underutilised spaces. So what this will do is really highlight a lot of the design features within that southern activity zone, still create a really good active edge on the northern zone. And what we're working through in terms of where the trees are, where the rain gardens are, is getting that balance right. And we've been through a few versions of this, so this is where we've landed with the trees that do have a good dialogue with the architecture, but if we need to scale that back or scale it up, we can do that as well.
Just a question on the dining.
Yeah.
I thought in the last presentation we were going to have the dining on the sunny side of the street.
Yep.
and it looks like it's now on the shady side of the street?
We've got space for it on both. So
Okay.
if we're hearing that there's too much dining on the north, we can scale it back as well.
Okay. Okay.
Street, what's happening on that area?
We've got a couple images of that. So
Oh, you've got some.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, I might just be able to zoom in on this one, so it's probably the clearest. Because we're all going one way from east to west with Emerson Street now, it's a lot clearer in terms of where vehicles move through the intersection. But also with Dalton Street, we've had a lot of back and forth with the transport team, but we've landed on Dalton Street running north as well. So Dalton Street being one, it is north, yeah. Dalton Street being one way, Emerson Street being one way, the vehicle movements are a lot clearer. And then what it does is we've shown a zebra crossing on the southern side, but the whole section of Emerson Street through here will be raised for pedestrians. So whether you're on the north or the south, we'll prioritise the south, but it still means that we're making it good for flow along the northern side as well.
It's turning in off Tennyson, isn't it?
No, you'd be exiting Dalton Street onto Tennyson. Yeah.
Just car parks a bit front.
Yeah. Which
some of the feedback we had from the transport team was because we originally were looking at the other direction, the stacking length on Tennyson for the right turn became problematic. It could only accommodate 3 or 4 cars. So if we were to increase that load, then stacking became a problem. So hence that was one of the drivers to flip it the other way and maintain that.
The recommended or the allowed speed limit in the CBD is 50 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
Have you considered recommending that we lower that?
Yeah, shared spaces are designed to a 10-kilometre speed limit, and in different places that can be enforced. Other places, the design helps reinforce that. But I think from what we're hearing from Napier, I think enforcement of that would really help. We've seen people going a lot faster than that down Emerson Street currently, and that's a real issue. So these things will help, but I think some level of management as well. Moving into the central section of Emerson Street. So likewise, currently the chicane means that there's tight spaces, there's wider spaces, and what we're trying to do is find that commonality through the street. This is just showing an example of not only the bollards, but the lighting and the palms, currently creating a lot of confusion and clutter. And what we're trying to do is streamline movement through the space, but also creating that friction through the furniture and planting to encourage slower speeds. Just a couple of shots through Emerson Street itself. And these are still 75%, so we will take feedback from this session and carry it through. But what we're really keen for today was to put pen to paper and have stuff that we could receive good feedback from. That's showing the activity zone on the southern side with space for furniture on the northern zone. And so there's space for a really good accessible footpath plus the furniture, which would be in line with the palms.
Oh, I see.
It's just showing the intersection of Market Street. So this is a bit of a shift from how Market Street and Emerson Street operate at the moment. It would be moving the carriageway from the southern side to the northern side, and then a relocation of space for the existing sculpture as well. Talking to Market Street. Again, it's a little subspace within Emerson Street, and currently it does have a level of activation. What we're keen to do is just see expanding the amount of uses that Market Street has and possibilities, whether it's in the evening or afternoon with Market Street Bar, or whether it's lunchtime or earlier in the day, and making sure it can be active in different uses. So this is Market Street as it is currently. And again, this is where we're interested in adding catenary lighting on self-supported poles, but creating another little festive subspace of the whole project, and using elements of the furniture palette, the circular seats, to help pepper the space and encourage the public to interact with the space as well.
Can I ask a question? That Market Street, Emerson Street interaction sort of becomes the quasi performance space, I suppose, for lack of a better term. Has there been much thought put into how you, with the architecture of the street, encourage that more? Or provide a stage? Yeah, I don't know if I'm thinking about building a stage, but you get the point of my question.
So moving from 75% to 100%, that's where the placement of street furniture, street lighting, those sorts of things provide that space. At the moment, as you'll know, there's basically just a large area of paving, and we've got the palms fixed, but other than that, it's very flexible. And that's what we would, in order to accommodate those sorts of activities of different sizes and scales, we would still be allowing for space to be able to accommodate those events, but also the placement of our furniture and the placement of the lights and things will actually reinforce those areas for that sort of activity. Yes.
As we get to Marine Parade Piazza, there are a few more design elements, furniture elements that are helping do that. So that's certainly something we could consider for Market Lane as well. Currently what we've done is we've just made sure that the trees along Emerson Street allow for that permeability across. And a lot of that tree placement has been thinking about not only how people are moving along the street longitudinally, but how they're moving across it laterally and where the side laneways are and where those desire lines are at the moment.
Love our designers speak.
Yeah, just that picture of Market Street, the poles, they're quite tall. Just the interference with the architecture. I just figure people want to take pictures and they don't want poles in the way. So the way it is at the moment, you don't get that interference.
Again, that's just the refinement of, it's to show you graphically, so it's easier to see on the imagery. But certainly the height and the scale of those sorts of features, and particularly the catenary lighting, is something that will be refined.
Yeah, we have gone for a smaller scale pole than what we have on the zip, but certainly being able to be flexible with the stagger and where the existing trees are in this image, and making sure we're not doing a disservice to the facades as well. So moving on to Marine Parade Piazza, this is the last piece of the design presentation. This is a really important space to showcase what Napier is, and it's the front door really to the city, to many visitors, and the connection to all the great foreshore spaces. So it's a really important piece of this project. We want to create a lot of flexibility in terms of how people can use the space. So flexibility during normal days for lunchtime, creating kind of subspaces, but then the capacity to cater to events in a much greater way. So that connection to the foreshore character through the planting, I think we're cognizant that it's not a full waterfront coastal planting palette, like getting the balance right between what the character of all the subspaces along the foreshore are is really important, but something that's really green, nice to be in, and kind of a draw card for the city. So this is as it is currently. Marine Parade itself is quite wide. The space of Emerson Street is a little bit challenging with the steps and all the different elements within it, and particularly the vehicles coming from Herschel Street round into Emerson Street on the blind corner of the Masonic is a real challenge. So what we're proposing in this design is to manage the vehicle movement, so vehicles are only coming from Hastings Street into the loading lane, so we're not having vehicles move through in front of the Masonic building, but also rationalising the lawn around the existing Putakawas, doing something some more functional, circular shape. That also lends itself to a language of planters and other design features through the space that can create a really active, exciting experience. The other piece is also rationalising the pedestrian crossings across Marine Parade but also Tennyson Street. So that connection from the piazza across to the museum is a lot more legible and a lot more visible for people. So this is the scale of the carriageway as it is. And like Emerson Street, it's defended with bollards. What we're proposing to do is tighten that up, create it flush, and use lighting and furniture elements as that delineation, not only for vehicles, but as a pedestrian. So it's a clear point where you see there's a change in environment and you can check for cars before you cross the street. These are some images. Again, really interested in the idea of reusing some of the lights if that's supported, but also using different elements, including a halo type light feature that helps activate the space and could be a reason that people come into the space at different times of the year to see the change and can be a real draw card. And this is showing the frontage of the Masonic. So by limiting or removing vehicles from here, we can create a really active frontage.
Okay.
And just showing the crossing of Marine Parade itself.
Just an issue we've had along Marine Parade has been big trucks going along there. This obviously would be very difficult for a truck to go along, would it?
It will still be designed to carry vehicles through the space, but in terms of the vehicle movements, I think from the transport team, we've heard that there's a desire to limit heavy vehicles through the space. So these design changes, although it will be able to take large vehicles, they're going to discourage vehicles, heavy vehicles through the space. It's going to be a slower, more difficult space to move through for a vehicle.
We have been trying to do that for a while. And I think it's like when the lime trucks come in and then it's the quickest route down the parade. It mightn't be quick with this design, maybe.
Yeah, truckies don't like slowing down, speeding up. That's the, you know, if they encounter that, they'll find another way because it's, you know, it's bad for the vehicles. So if you've got a raised platform, they have to slow down, through and down again. It becomes problematic. They find another route.
George's driving.
Which is the state highway though.
Okay, I think we're getting towards the end of the presentation, but certainly the amount of opportunity that we see within the Marine Parade Piazza, like peppering that through the rest of the street, and that's been informed by the different circular furniture features and kind of expanding that look and feel through the whole street.
LTPs ago.
So just to conclude, we will go through the fly through, or should we talk to this one first? Before? Yeah. So this is a diagram we're talking about in terms of level of investment. And so what's important for us in terms of the design process is working out what pieces are common throughout. And so that activity zone, the furniture, the lighting, getting those features right are really important to the character. Whereas the materiality on the ground plane, there's ability to have a really successful street space in a variety of different methods. So what we're showing in all the images at the moment is a paved streetscape, but there will be a chance beyond this concept design to fine tune what that really means in terms of cost and rationalising it while keeping the really good part of the project or what makes the street distinct.
Because we don't, the 10.5 we've got currently in the draft 3-year plan, we don't actually know exactly what that will deliver, do we, in terms of these different options?
So we're in concept design at this stage, and so we haven't undertaken the rough order costs yet. That comes next.
Okay, just to conclude, we'll go through the fly through again, and I'll just talk to the pieces of the design we're going to finalise over the next 4 weeks. So I think any feedback on how the street is structured, and what we presented to Napier City Business this morning was elevations of where all the businesses and buildings sat in relation to what was being proposed. So we can circulate that, and we have got a couple of printouts here, but we've got a lot of flexibility where stuff sits in that activity zone versus the northern zone as well, so we can push and pull that as much as we need to. We have obviously shown some dining on the northern side, but we anticipate where there is existing dining on the southern side, we'll be able to retain that. And our experience has been, particularly through the life of a project or a design like this, businesses will change as well, and then new hospitality will pop up. So we need to be adaptable throughout the life of the project with that. On other ones, we've ended up moving gardens right before we build them because the business has changed, and we've got the ability to do that, but the structure of the street stays the same. We're also really interested in any feedback around how the street looks, whether the circular geometry and the proposed light poles are landing with everyone. There's a lot of ability to develop that in the subsequent stages, but because this is concept design for the whole project and we'll be going into more detailed phase 1 and 2 next, it's really good to understand what the vision is for the whole street.
With the reduction of traffic through Emerson Street, have you seen how that will affect the traffic flow in Dickens and Tennyson Streets? I know I'm on a bike basically.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's hell going through, down Tennyson Street as it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be worse if there's more traffic and it's all going at 50 kilometres an hour as they're allowed to.
It's definitely been part of the conversations with the traffic team. There's a level of detail to do traffic assessment of those flow-on effects, but certainly in terms of the logic and the principles of what we're doing, we're getting really good support. Is there anything else you'd add, James?
No, as you say,
Yeah.
traffic impact assessments, next catalogue for range
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
delve down into a lot more detail in terms of those impacts. And if things need to move, they
Sorry, just wondering, do we have existing analysis of that through the focal work? Did that extend to those areas as well? The traffic stuff?
Not quite in that level of detail, I don't think. It was more pedestrian vehicle interactions.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Even the Tennyson Street stuff that they've done in the past?
It's
I
more
think
of
if there's work that they've done
engineering.
outside of Emerson Street, it may be that our transportation team have that,
Yeah.
but not as, so we can, that's where the transportation team working with our design team, that's how they've been working together. So we can just ask for that. Absolutely, yeah.
In terms of next steps, as you now work towards 100%, is there anything, specific that you need feedback from us today on that?
I think in terms of where we've developed the look and feel,
Yeah.
in terms of the lighting.
I think lighting would probably be the key one for me to hear from, because I know that was something a number of elected members were quite interested in last time. So invite people to share their views on what you've seen today with regards to lighting. Rhonda?
I don't mind the new one with the balls on. I particularly don't like that halo light. It doesn't fit Napier. It's going to be right in front of the Masonic, which is that whole facade from the TNG building to the Masonic. It's one of our most photographed spaces, and I just don't think it's the right look. And that I like the lights together. That's the old lights, but I just personally don't think it's. It looks out of character.
Very modern and not in keeping with the.
Out of character. And
I
just
agree,
don't
Rhonda.
think it fits.
Yeah.
That's my yeah. Yeah, it does
think,
like beam me up, Scotty, or something.
Separate to the halo idea was using projection lighting and getting some movement and change, having programmable lighting. So that's something we're also really interested in feeding through where we can, but take your point.
I think we have such an amazing foreshore space the sound shells lit up with lights, you can add too much and it can be too busy. And, you know, with, you know, our Norfolk pines have lights in them. And when you're in that space at night, it is beautiful now. The uplighting underneath the Pahutakawa is beautiful. So, yeah, I just think you can do too much and make it too busy. And, you know, some of the focus of Napier, that's one of, you know, the buildings actually are a piece of art themselves now.
One of the opportunities that's been identified by Te Waka Rangapu and our mana whenua was around the potential for telling stories or bringing the foreshore, the water over into the piazza space through lighting. And so that's when Corey's talking about the projection of lighting. It would be down on the ground plane rather than necessarily something that's overhead.
But also, if there's really strong support for feature lighting of the architectural facades, if we get support for that, that is something we can incorporate as well.
Any other feedback, Hayley?
Yeah, so I was one of the ones that was really keen on those other lights, but then I subsequently found out later that there was quite a lot of maintenance issues and stuff with those lights. So probably wouldn't have pushed quite so strongly to keep them if I'd known that.
Yeah.
But I do like how you've used and incorporated them. I'm assuming that all of those maintenance issues would be able to be dealt with at some level.
Is that it's the fittings, the light fittings themselves cause the headaches in terms of maintenance.
That they could be replaced and keep the structure. Yeah.
Being replaced as part of the installation.
And that fitting that we're researching is downward projection as well, so it's not just everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a lot more controlled and it's a more efficient fitting.
In terms of the rest of the look and feel, I find it quite, as a local representative, it's kind of hard to bring a community voice to that, and it comes down to personal preference. And you guys are the artists, not us. I suppose for me at this point, with that caveat in mind, it does feel a little circle heavy. But there's the narrative to weave through that, which I'm keen to see how that brings it in together in a bit more of a cohesive way. Because I suppose when I think of Art Deco, if that was sort of the influence, yes, there's circles, but there was also like more the fans and the straight lines, and it didn't have a super Art Deco feel, but I get where you're going, and I think it's about waiting to see how the narrative ties it together.
We've also been thinking of, we're keen to support the street having an identity that isn't necessarily mirrored the architecture. It's got its own point of view, but it's complementary. So
Juliet.
Question about the quality of the light, harsh versus soft. Like, I'm just a bit concerned that maybe some light might be too harsh, like interrogation sort of spotlight sort of thing.
Often that's down to the temperature. So lighting temperature, if you go up to 4,000 Kelvin, that's like a street light, which is a very blue light. Street projects, we always push for 3,000, which is a much warmer ambient light. And
I was talking more about the focus of the light, whether it's going to be sort of spreading out or it's going to be focused on a very small area.
typically it's quite diffuse, but there's a difference between catenary lighting that's quite diffuse and really comfortable, whereas the typical light fittings, and I think you'll even get that through the modern circular ones that we're showing, but a street optic will be a little bit harsher, so certainly areas to balance that, but I think we're keen to create a really comfortable environment through the lighting.
There won't be cars there. Any further feedback? Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's looking like it's on the right trajectory in terms of look and feel, bearing in mind, yeah, I do agree with the feedback that's been given with regards to lighting, and obviously the fact that, you know, there is a whole community that will have a view on the look and feel. So, but you know, at this stage and in the ongoing development of the concept, yeah, I'm supportive of where we're at this stage, and yeah, looking forward to seeing where we are at the 100% of concept design. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
And also, if anyone has any thoughts in the night that they would like to share with us, please do feel free to email us so that we can, whenever you like, I'll have a look at it in the morning. But please do send through any comments and thoughts you may have.
I did have one question with the circle seats that I was looking at. They're not very user-friendly for older people because you can't, you've got pictures of
So
people
at the
sitting
moment,
inside
the
them.
design shows a combination of the two. So there are some that are bench seats with backs, and there are others that are circular, which is kind of encouraging groups of and conversation. So we're just working through those at the moment. But yeah, take your
Certainly
point.
backrest, armrest.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to.
Excellent. Thank you very much to our team and to our externals that have joined us today. Excited.
Thank you. Push yourself up.
Can I just ask a question? How, doesn't have to be into it. We often put seats down, but sometimes people want to go outside and work with laptops these days and sit there. Is there anything around that you can have a table and a seat, or?
There was some in the pictures.
There was?
Yep.
Must have missed them.
Must have. Outdoor furniture, including tables, yeah.
You probably have to buy a coffee to go
You have to go to the library for that.
Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break, team, before our next workshop.
I can't even turn myself
Is our leader going to talk to us?
Well, I don't even how excited I was.
Over the
But it's in, we're having to dig it all up.
feeling a little bit anyway.
So while we do some of those boots.
Christine Rankin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Short skirts.
With her ear, are you talking about her
No,
earrings?
you've got the
Christine
earrings.
Rankin earrings.
I said I was feeling a bit Christine Rankin.
Oh,
My
with
short
the-
skirt and a long jacket.
There you go. So we've got a first speaker, a second speaker, a third speaker, and a leader's reply.
Yep.
I've just read the rules. Your leader reply cannot be your third speaker.
Yeah.
So
But it can be either one of these.
can
so
be your first speaker or your second speaker. So we've obviously got our MOOC, and in my mind it's pretty simple that we've got two main points to prove, right? They need to prove that climate anxiety is excessive, and they need to prove that social media balance is fueling excessive anxiety.
Yeah.
So those are the two
You'll
bits.
bet. Yeah.
And so those are our two bits to like create points about, right?
Yeah. There's also
So-
what is social media.
Yeah, so one has to focus on climate anxiety and rebutting that actually there isn't excessive climate anxiety, it's quite the opposite, which I think you can easily do, right? People are not as anxious about climate change as what they should be, as what all the reports say, and so that's one train that we need to do around the climate anxiety, and our second argument needs to be around the social media, so you talking about TikTok, you've got what it actually is.
Yeah.
So those
Hello, thank
two
you.
arguments
very much.
got to be our
Yeah.
like our first and our second.
I'm target.
That one, was that the one that had,
Hey, has anyone about having flu jabs yet?
you know, I was talking to you about yesterday? Eco
Yeah.
anger and eco.
Because I got one last year.
That would come under this one.
Under
So,
climate anxiety.
yeah, there was some different
it's
terms,
come
with
out
eco
about
anger and
flu jabs.
like
Yeah.
eco frustration or
So
whatever.
that one that they were talking about,
We obviously did.
TikTok,
We obviously did. Get invited.
creating empathy in research.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, that's
It was simple. And then
There's a few bugs going around at the moment.
she's fine.
You were invited last year.
Like a cup of tea and stuff.
I don't know if
I don't know if you
sat
think
in
it
there,
does.
was getting angry.
I'm gonna come. I think that's a bit thick.
Because I think that there
Yeah,
isn't
that's it.
enough.
Kirsten, did you know we never got the invite for to have the flu
There's
jab?
quite a bit of anxiety out there, but not with the people.
Ask Rachel, apparently it was a month
Yeah,
ago.
see,
We
So
didn't-
that one
I went last year.
talking about
had wondered about
climate anxiety is still a construct in development.
Yeah, that's what Rachel said. It's a health and safety issue. I think you should bring it up at all of them.
Yeah.
and we can spend the whole way formulate our arguments in support of whatever our
Yeah.
role is, and then maybe we keep our meetings and we get back together and do a little sense check with each other about kind of where we're got to.
And try and pull it
Pull it all together.
Yeah.
Because the first speaker has like a tiny little bit of rebuttal, because we have one speaker for you. The second speaker has no rebuttal. Third speaker has lots of rebuttal, sums up all the arguments.
I know.
And then the leaders reply.
But we had one
very
at the other
similar to
one.
the third speaker. You
One
summarise
person
and you
came to the
basically
one
explain why our
representation with
points
one, then he
have
left
the
when we all got in groups.
And
Yeah, but yeah, they were.
no new
I know, they
no
didn't say
new
who they were.
Yeah. Because I think we've
You?
If they
Me?
anti,
I'm happy to do.
probably.
Yeah.
You do
And we
that one?
can, you wouldn't come here if you were pro.
Well, exactly. We'll be writing. as we
Probably
go.
not, no.
You do the leaders.
Where's that
reply?
cup of tea?
So, yep, leaders reply.
Yeah.
Got big fat nothing today.
And then-
Well, I guess it's only 2 hours.
I'm quite happy to do that. Is it anxiety and go into the other things that it's not necessarily
I'm a bit gutted about it's gonna,
anxiety.
my blue
That's
jam.
that one. So the first argument is that climate
To go pay for it
anxiety
yourself.
is disproving that climate anxiety is not excessive.
Yeah.
And then the second argument is all about social media
has fueled
fuels
it. Yeah.
imbalance, I reckon, is our argument.
Yeah.
Been interesting
So we
meeting.
have
Well, you're
that
far better on
individual.
social media